All right, welcome back to Eve Talks. We're joined by Jason Adulley. Thank you for taking the time to come speak to us.
No problem.
Um, how are you?
I'm well. It is morning.
Yeah, really early. Well, yeah, let's just get into it. So, where and when did you work?
So last summer, I was working with in the office of Assemblyman Michael Blake, um, who is an assemblyman in the South Bronx. So like in the district next to mine. So yeah, I was working there from June to August of 2017.
Cool. And how did you manage to secure that opportunity? Like,
Around November of 2016, I was looking for internships within the government, and I had contacted the people from my scholarship program and said like, hey, like, do you have any like connections for me or anyone I should contact to like really help with my search? And they were like, you should contact Michael Blake's people because he was an assemblyman who like addressed some students in my program, and also like he was also just became one of the vice chairs of the Democratic National Committee, so he was like getting up there in terms of like the political spectrum. And so they told me like to contact his people, and so I had contacted his people like, hey, like I'm interested, and I was referred to by the Ron Brown Scholarship Program, and then they had told me like, okay, send us your resume and a cover letter and we'll get back to you. And after that they had like interviewed me. So I had to go down to the Bronx, go to their office. I was interviewed by his chief of staff, and then they said I got the job. Yeah.
congrats. Um, so you talked a little bit about your Ron Brown scholarship. Could
Yeah.
you just mention that a little bit more? Like, how instrumental was that in securing the opportunity?
Pretty instrumental. So the Ron Brown Scholarship um, is like giving me a certain amount of money throughout my 4 years here to help with like financial aid and like tuition burden and things like that. But it's also like been invaluable in giving me like a network of like very like well like established like people in different careers like politics or journalism, business, things of that nature, and like always looking to help me out. Or always telling me like, Jason, if you need anything, please contact us. I think that was like the first time I like used that network, and it's been like pretty good for me. So.
Yeah. That's good. So going from securing this opportunity, like, what were your concerns? Like, what did you have to do in terms of like housing, transportation, food? Like, did you think about that when you were applying for this, or once you got accepted?
So I was pretty, it's pretty good in terms of transportation and like housing, just because like it's near my house. I think I was a little like nervous about staying close to home because I'd stayed at home previous summer working in New York, but it was on Wall Street, and so it was like I'm gonna be really close to home, not necessarily like in an area where it's really conducive to making, I think, like upward business connections.
Right.
However, I think like I thought about like the opportunity was for me to be in my community, and making connections with like students in my area, like high school students, different like local college students, who may be like working in the South Bronx over the summer. And I think like once I thought about that, like as a positive as well, I think that like it made like any of my concerns kind of go away from there. So yeah.
Yeah, that definitely shifts your perspective. Um, what went through your mind when you found out that you got it? Like, what was the first thing that you did?
I called my mom. I was like, yo, mom, I got the internship. She was like, really? That's good. That's good. Where? I was like, oh, it's at home. She was like, why? I was like, you shouldn't be staying at home. I was like,
It's a good opportunity.
it's a really good opportunity.
Yeah.
And then after that, I called my dad. My dad was hyped. He was like, this is good. Like, because I was always interested in politics, he was like, you can work in the government. You can see how it is. See what it is that you like about it. And I was like really hyped. And I came back to school the next day and told everyone. And I think people were really excited for me then. And I think like once it like settled in, I was like, all right, like this is gonna be me getting a chance to directly like affect like my government, directly affect my community. And I don't know. It's like you've been like working for like a certain thing for like a certain amount of time in your life, and you're just like this is like the fruition of like all that and like all the things I've studied.
Yeah.
So I was like really excited.
Definitely. So, like, walk us through your day-to-day experience in the internship or the opportunity.
So yeah, on a regular day, you'd like walk in. Like there's a group of interns. There's a group of like college interns from like different places. And then there was a group of like high school interns as well. So college interns would go in. We'd meet with like the chief of staff, the head like policy advisor, and communications advisor, and they'd give us like our assignments for the day. So whether it be like we'd be given like a topic that Michael Blake would be speaking on, and we'd have prepared talking points based on that topic, and also based on his constituents, or we'd have to like look up a specific law he'd be like advocating for when he went to like Albany where the assembly met. So we'd have to like write a policy brief so that he was like up to date on like any like policy that he like need to be discussing, and so we'd work on that for about 4 hours. We'd probably finish by those 4 hours, and we'd get lunch, and afterwards we'd get briefed on like if he had an event or he had an event but he wasn't gonna be there, so we'd like prep ourselves for that. So we'd get like prepare like not talking points but just like remarks on his behalf, just make sure we're up to date, and like different things like that. And then we begin new projects for the next day, policy briefs, different things like that, planning for any of his like fundraisers for his election. Sometimes we'd have to like make phone calls because he was campaigning but outside of the office, but yeah.
Um, did you think that you were prepared for all those tasks? Like, did high school prepare you? Your scholarship program? Did Williams prepare you?
I think Williams in particular prepared me. I think it was like I'd be given like a certain like given like a large like range of information, and I had to discern which pieces were more important than the other,
Right.
which essentially like what you do on a regular basis, because like we have like a lot of reading, and like like I mean like it's really important that you like discern information from all the reading that we have to do in order to get like what it is that you need. And so like I was using that very well, and also just like whenever I had to make phone calls, I think like my scholarship prepared me for that. Just like they had like taught me how to like properly like address people like whom I like didn't know or like getting to know, and like wanted to make like firm connections with throughout my time, like in my career. And so like I think like that prepared me. And I think like high school, like having to go back home every day, like I knew how to like talk to people on like the upper like east side, and also the people like back home.
Right.
And I think like working back in the South Bronx, something like I hadn't done, just because like you're here in Williams and it's far away from home, and like you're in like upper east side, and it's like different environment, different people, different cultures. And so like being back home like with people I'd like grown up with, like centers I'd been around all my life, and like those strong connections, so it was like really good for me.
Yeah. Definitely a different perspective. I think, yeah, you touched on it a little bit. Like being in Williams is like definitely isolating, so that can be a challenging step to overcome.
Yeah.
Did the realities of the experience meet your expectations? Like, I know you're from the Bronx. Like, I'm also from the Bronx, and like in terms of location, you're probably very familiar. But like in terms of what you were expecting from the internship experience itself, like, did it meet that? Did you derive the value that you thought that you would?
I think I got more than what I was anticipating, in that like the work I was doing, like I was told by not only my like the assemblyman, but his chief of staff, which is like, this is very important, and everything you're doing like right now is like things you'd be doing if you're like in a high level of government, like preparing briefs, like talking points, making sure like your like elected officials up to date.
Right.
I think like working at home was really important for me. I think there's a certain amount of time where you're like you're getting like older and you want to like move away from your community, but that was like really important for me to really like understand what it is that my community is going through. Like I also got a chance to work with my local precinct. So like our chief of staff assigned us all like a personal project, and so like I decided I want to like look at like the trends of crime statistics in my local precinct. And so like I went to like any like neighborhood meetings that the police were gonna be at. I actually went talked to like 3 officers at the precinct that like reported the data, like drafted a report, gave it to the assemblyman so he could talk about like how like crime was decreasing, like which crimes were decreasing, and things like that. And that was like really important for me to see that like with each passing day, like people like me are doing like the work. They're like directly affecting lives, and like it's also important that we understand that crime is decreasing, and that we like see like our neighborhood in like a positive light. I think the most important thing was just like, as much as I loved it, I think that like it was also important that I understood that like I think that I could best affect like government and policy from someone of an outside perspective, and that like I love writing briefs. I love doing research to find stuff, but I feel like before I get into it, I want to do like more research, write like papers, write articles, things like that.
Right.
Um, Work where I can like have more of like a hands-on look at like one particular project. So like I got into housing over like my internship experience, and I was like super interested in like housing law, things like that, and so I was like super focused on that. And so, but I was like having to manage different topics like voting, like district lines, which is super important, and also ties into housing, like crime and things like that. But like when I got into housing, I was like, all right, like I firmly believe everyone like deserves to have like affordable housing, and I'm like looking at like policy that can affect that, and like working within the Bronx helped me look at like how housing policy is in my neighborhood, and how I could affect it there, but like how I can affect like housing policy in like urban cities like across America.
Right.
And so I think that like it was really important for me like to understand that, and understand like how like while I may not want to be like in government like directly after Williams, I think like somewhere down the line, I'm really excited to come back to it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's great. Yeah, you touched on a lot of things there. Like, definitely a concern of mine is affordable housing, especially in New York.
No facts. No facts.
But that's
Rent
good.
is too damn high.
Yeah, no, it is, and I want to go back. So, I'm gonna have to figure that one out. I'm counting on you to craft some innovative policy. So I think you kind of touched on this a little bit, but if you could give us like a lesson in one or two sentences, like that you learned while you were working there that you otherwise would not have known.
I think two things, both of which are on connections. Don't be afraid to reach out to people. I think I was really afraid of putting myself out there in terms of professional environment. And when I like let my and I know I'm privileged to have a scholarship, which is also like very important, but like making that like first step goes like a long way, because
Right.
like it's gonna be what you're doing for like the rest of your life.
Right.
And then two, like while you're working there, make sure you establish those connections with your coworkers, because that also goes a long way. Like I have like a couple of friends I'm still in contact with, people who go to like to schools in like Minnesota, like Syracuse, like Georgia, like really good friends of mine who are like I'm like looking forward to seeing in like New York over like the summer, over like spring break. And those are people who are gonna be like really good friends like for the rest of my life, but also like really good connections that I'm gonna like need and like gonna value like if I like continue on this trajectory. People who like I worked with like housing policy, people who are excited to work on the same things as me. Like these are people who are like really important for my growth and like for like my development, like both like in a like professional sense, but also like in for like me as a person.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think that's great. Yeah, definitely a large part of why we're even doing this talk series is just to get people to understand about that point in particular. Like reaching out to people has like really no negatives. Like if they don't respond, they don't respond.
Exactly.
You're in the same position that you were in prior to reaching out.
Yeah, I was
but
like,
if they do, there is like a definite benefit from coming.
I think it was like talking to you sometime last year, and you had like said that like I don't know how like you were like emailing like alums like you email like certain amount of alums like every day. I've been doing that, and they just always like if not everyone, someone like at least one person will get back to you, and in time like someone I emailed like beginning of February like just contacted me 2 days ago and was like I'm so sorry I didn't read this, like I'd love to talk to you, and now we're like talking like on Friday, and it's like super dope.
Especially with the Williams Network, I think like Williams Network in particular is like very strong, but just reaching out to anyone is really important. I mean, if they don't respond, they don't respond. You know, like life goes on. But if they do, that can be really transformative, as you've evidenced. And the note of developing your contacts like that you work with, I think that's really important as well. Like for sure, you'll definitely develop really meaningful friendships, but also relationships that you can leverage in the future for future opportunities. You already kind of touched on this again, but in one sentence, piece of advice for a Williams student. actually, piece of advice for a Williams student specifically who wants to work in policy or government.
I say start broad in terms of like what you're interested in, because there's so much. There's like a large range of policy. If you have the chance to like, it's like do research on like a broad topic, or like get to work where you're like dealing with a bunch of different topics. That's like super important to understand. Where like you can't focus on all policy. You can't. You can focus on like economics. You can focus like with like housing, with like voting, and there's like so many like different like aspects of it that like once you like see like which ones like is best suited to like your preferences, like it's gonna go a long way. So like make sure you like get like a holistic view,
Right.
Before you like jet set on your way to policy.
For sure. I think, yeah, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, like, you know, you're going to probably, I think the statistic isn't, like, you spend 80% of your time working or something like that. So you definitely want to work on something that you're passionate about, and not spread yourself too thin. But, yeah, no, this was helpful. Last question. If you had to listen to an Eve talk, who are 2 or 3 alumni, students, staff, faculty, or people in general that you'd like to hear from?
I think one of my sociology professors, her name is Christine Simcoe. She's dope. I'm interested in seeing like how like her like career trajectory played out. It'd be really cool. She's like also helped me out like a bunch with like recommendations and things like that, and so it's just like be really cool to see like how her career played out. Alum. There's no one. Ahmad Green.
Okay.
Ahmad Green graduated 2016. I think someone told me he was like working at CNN for some time, and that he's like I think at Princeton pursuing a PhD right now, and like seeing like what he's done, like what he's studying now, like what is it that he's passionate about. That'd be like really cool. And then student, I was talking to Frankie Paris, and she's doing like a bunch of like really interesting stuff. Seeing like what she's doing. So yeah.
Christine, Ahmad, and Frankie. Jason just put you on the spot. So, yeah, no, this has been great. Thank you for coming in to speak.
Oh, no problem.
Yeah, this was really
I don't have
helpful.
class.
Okay. All right. Yeah, so that's it. Cut.